Yeah, it's recording.
Thank you.
So for assignment 1, the case study,
Yes.
can we use an article from the list that you provided on Moodle? So
Yeah.
in the assignment 1, like resources, it has articles there. Can we use one of those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And wait, sorry, I'm a bit confused. Okay, so I've done both the assignment,
Okay.
and is commentary 1 the one where we pick from the list, or is it commentary 2 where we pick from the list?
All right. So I could go into the slides now, and then that might help.
Yes, please.
Just in short, in response to your question. So commentary 1 is where you've got a case study or a case from the media. And yes,
oh yes, that's fine.
Use
that's
it
fine.
from the resource list that Gina was referring to.
The one we picked in the class as well. I can pick one of them as well.
Absolutely. You had.
Oh, I thought that was for assignment 2, the one that we picked in the seminar.
Yeah. No, so let me just go back a step. Commentary 1 is based on a case that you want to look at and bring in your discussion, your analysis from your reading, referring to key chapters and wider reading. And these are on the slides that I'm going to share with you that I've put together for this section. Commentary 2, I'm coming to that, yeah, is an article from a journal that you have selected. Now, the difference being is that one is looking at what is happening in the real world, sort of what are the discussions that are carrying on in practice, what is that is relevant to education, find in the media, and then linking that to literature. The second one is actually looking within academic literature to see what the discipline is engaging in about matters that relate to ethics and, you know, those questions that we've been looking at in terms of what is it to live an ethical life, and then think about that within the context of education. So the journal article needs to engage with concerns that we have about education. It can't necessarily, you know what I'm trying to say? So that's why I was trying to steer you in the direction of looking at journals that come from that kind of discipline that will help you.
So like the dilemmas in teaching happiness, that one?
Yes.
Okay.
For which component?
For component 2.
Okay, and what was the article?
It was called Dilemmas in Teaching Happiness.
Where was it from?
Your list.
Yeah,
we did that one in the class, didn't we?
We did, and that would apply to the media, wouldn't it? That article was from the media, wasn't it?
No,
Yeah.
that's a journal. That's a journal article, Muna, on.
Oh, okay. So that's why I want the clarification, because I think that's important. If it's a journal article, then what you're saying is I'm looking at what Selden and his colleague Selden et al. Have discussed about happiness within this journal, right? So that that makes it part of that academic discourse. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Whereas commentary 1 is using something that has been discussed in the media, and then drawing from that the discussion points that link to the literature. Are we okay with this so far?
Yeah. And I wanted to know, do we have to double space our text?
Oh, that's a very good question. Okay, so if you look at the guidance for writing assignments in the program handbook, that is what it says. If it is 1.5, that's still acceptable for me. That's still acceptable.
Okay.
But if it's single space, that is not ideal. So yes.
So I should do it 2.0?
Yes, double space it, or 1.5.
Okay, perfect.
And sorry, so
that's all right.
For both of them, are we meant to be referring to the stuff that we went over in lecture? Like, are we meant to be comparing it to the different types of ethics, like the utilitarianism and the other ones that we went over?
All right,
But
so that's correct. So what you want to do is that's correct. So what you want to do is link the article that you find in the media to ways in which you can interpret it from an ethical position, and that's where you're looking at key text, thinking of particular ethical perspectives and ways in which you can interpret that and how that helps us to understand better the points that are being discussed, right?
okay, and is that for both of them or no?
For both of them, you want to engage in the literature that looks at moral philosophy and ethics. So that's why your key text is important. That's why your wider reading is important in terms of other literature from your reading list or from extended reading that you have covered yourself within that field that can help.
So the only difference between the two is one is a case is the articles basically. So one's a case study and one's a critique, but the actual context is still the same for both of them.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So what you have to think about is, if I were an expert wanting to look at issues that concern education from an ethical perspective, where would I draw my knowledge from? How would I engage with that discussion with an understanding of the field of which I'm hoping to be an expert in? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So and you're absolutely right. It's not trying to trip you up. It's just trying to find different ways in which you can actually embed your understanding within a real context, but also show that you have read and understood the literature well enough to be able to engage in that discipline. Okay, so if I show you the slides, I'll try and share this a little bit. I think this is what I want to share, so let me try and do that. Can you see a slide in front of you now?
Yeah.
Oh, that's reassuring. Okay. Okay, so what I have in the next slide, what I thought would be helpful, can you see the table that is on the second slide that I've just clicked onto?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so what I've done is it's only 5 slides that you have here, but as this is being recorded, it can be something you can come back to, and the aim of this is to try and help you to deconstruct or just to break down the different elements that you want to look at and focus on in order to structure your different pieces of work that you're writing. Okay, so critical commentary number 1 is the chosen case study example.
Yeah.
All right, and so if you think of this as a stage by stage point, if you look in the first column here, I don't know if you can see my cursor.
Yeah.
What I thought would be helpful is if I go into a different color and I say, okay, if you were to look at your article, and I've just pulled something from the BBC website on the next slide, which I hope I can share with you and you can see as well. What you would want to be doing in the first stage of this particular component is have the article in front of you and read it through, and then go through it again and say, okay, what is it saying? What is it talking about? What is it that I know from reading this? Okay? Now, what I'm hoping this will help you to do is to break down the stages in your preparation and your planning for what you decide to include and what you need to make more concise in the way that you introduce the article when you come to drafting it as a written piece. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I'm trying to somehow, hopefully, if you can see this happening, avoid too much description, right? But say, okay, from this stage, what I'm trying to do is tease out what are the key points that I want to hold on to. So what is it about? What do we know? This is the sort of preliminary reading and noting. And so here you would say, if it's you know, we can come back to this sort of the advantages of teaching happiness, for example, all right?
Mhm.
That may be what it's talking about. Now, what are the key points? Do you see what I'm trying to suggest here is what you're doing?
Yeah.
And if you use this as a guide for yourself, hopefully it will help you to reflect on what it is you're using from the article and how you can expand on that. So what are the key points that you identify? You need to locate, highlight the main points, right? Because that's what's going to give you the substance of what you're going to engage with. So what are the key points? Maybe time. Oh, look, it's gone into black. All right, so what I'm trying to suggest is the key points is that the curriculum needs to include, yeah?
Mhm.
Needs to include this. Maybe it's about the mental health of young people. Do you see what I'm trying to suggest here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. And so you can carry on moving into the third column and think about what are the arguments that I can find from the article itself. At this point, I'm still concerned with the article that I've chosen. What can I find from this article that makes the case? So how do they support their key points that they want to communicate to their reader? You've got to think about what it is they're trying to communicate and how they're communicating it. All right, and then you can go on to see and discuss how effective that has been. How effective is that communication? And the way that you talk about the effectiveness of that is where you start to bring in your analysis, drawing in from your reading of the key text and the wider reading that you've done. Okay, so find and list the arguments that the article makes to support the main points. What are the main points? Go back to your column, find on your article what those main points are and what they say, what the authors say in terms of supporting those main points. So what might the supporting points be? Question over to you.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right, to you three.
What was the question?
Okay, so what might they be saying to support the case? What are the arguments? When we ask, you know, what are your arguments? You say, well, and basically this is the process of reasoning through the strengths of what these authors are making claims for, right?
Okay.
So if their claim is that we ought to have, and you see, if someone's saying that we ought to have something, the suggestion there is that it's implied that this is necessary. And if it's necessary, you must convince your audience of why and how that can be understood. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
So can you think of some of the arguments that an article that we've looked at together about happiness does that? What might be the reason that they give?
What, for teaching happiness?
Yeah?
I think, didn't they say that it promotes well-being, mental well-being with the children?
Okay, so that's a very good point. And then you would say because of mental health and well-being, so you could say recent studies support a need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or support the need to include happiness because, or recent, well, actually, let's say recent studies or reports show, and then you'd have to say which, right? Show that young people are increasingly showing signs of adverse health or sort of health concerns.
But this can have a diverse reaction as well, because children, for example, that get abuse and everything, they may take happiness in the wrong concept, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
I like what you're saying. Let's come to that in a moment. So recent studies reports show, according to the author, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the justification for the author to include this on the curriculum is to say that younger people are increasingly showing signs of mental health concerns, anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's increased, right. Now, what links can you make that to your reading? There might be some other arguments you can put there. I'm sort of going off the slide at this point, but can you see what I'm trying to do? Can you see what's off the slide? Or is it to you? Okay, excellent. So I was hoping that as I type, then you can sort of see how you can sort of start to build up a sense of how you can start to plan your response to the commentary, or start to build your response in your commentary for the article. Okay, so what links can you make to your reading of key and wider texts?
I'd have to look through.
Okay, so links to chapter on hedonism.
Oh yes, I wrote about
all right,
that on my phone,
and desire satisfaction.
But hedonism is a way of living, isn't it?
Yes. What you're looking at in these key chapters from the reading that you've seen in Schaefer-Landau is that we're talking about how we might see the way that we live through principles. Yeah. Right? So it's about a principled way of looking at life, of how we would be and act as individuals. So one thing is to suggest that, individuals will choose to live a certain way because they accept these principles as a way of life. Another is to say, this is what education should be doing, because it's actually a good idea, not just for individuals to live a particular way of life according to those particular principles, because we think it establishes a good way of living. Remember that the sort of desirable aim is to live a good life. Now we need to understand what we mean by a good life, right? Yeah. And suggest how that would be framed. So all of these ways that we're framing our understanding are in accordance with particular viewpoints that have been presented, argued, according to the arguments that help to show why that is more desirable as opposed to another way of looking at life. So that's one, so you have to sort of park that to one side, that actually underpinning all of this is how we choose to inform our way of looking at things. Yeah. And then say, actually, this is what education ought to be doing. So go on.
Sorry, can I add in that children that could get abused and things like that in my assignment?
So where you might want to put that in, isn't directly from the actual article, is if you see the columns here, you're then trying to say, okay, I can say something about what the article is saying in terms of the key points. I can identify that. I can also identify the arguments that have been made, and I can link it to literature and sort of make some interpretation.
Oh, I did find it from an article,
Pardon?
I did find it from an article about how children.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
what then you move to is the final column. What do you
Yeah.
take away? What do you interpret from your understanding and knowledge of the case and literature that you have linked to? So you can use counterpositions.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So as I've said in the black print underneath on the first block at the end, this is where you can further and consolidate your understanding, demonstrating your ability to analyze and synthesize text from your interpretation. So this is the point at which it's a departure from being purely descriptive to then trying to weigh up, reason, show your reasoning and your ability to reason through, which is what we're really keen on in terms of philosophy of education, the ability to reason through the arguments that you've identified, making the links with the literature, and then not just saying, oh, I can connect this to what I've read about hedonism or about Mill's notion of desire satisfaction and utilitarianism. Actually, what you're saying is, but there's ways of looking at this that are different, because if we consider another example where a child might be in an abusive situation, according to, and you can bring in that other literature. Right?
Okay.
Do you see what you're doing then? So it's so far it's kind of a linear way of trying to break down the puzzle of what this article is saying and then piece together a new kind of configuration that is yours. And what I mean by that is your ability to draw on other sources and then recreate another way of looking at what you have seen in this article. Because you mustn't make the assumption, and I'm going to get to this, you mustn't have the assumption that A, what you're reading is true, and B, that we all understand it in the same way. Yeah. So your challenge is to say, what does this suggest? How might this be seen from different lenses or different perspectives? What does this tell me? And what can I kind of imply from my understanding as what's important?
So we can use in the last paragraph, the last section table, we can use first person or no? Because we're talking about our understanding.
Okay, but you can also say that in a third person. It could be understood.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If the position of let's say, I don't know, let's think of an author. If we consider the position of Kant, for example, we might not be so concerned about children's happiness, because that may not be the main aim. And in fact, there's an interesting article that I had come across in terms of whether we are actually questioning whether we should be giving so much importance to happiness and whether that's actually counterintuitive or counterproductive. So there's some very interesting articles to be searching out there.
And also, so this table, is this basically our paragraphs? Or no?
Not entirely. What I'm trying to do is say, this is a process that you're undergoing, and the table is a way of helping to accompany you through that process.
Okay.
Once you've got all of these sort of pointers there, then what you want to do is say, okay, now let me think about planning my paragraph, how I'm going to introduce the article, what are the things that I'm going to highlight, and then how am I going to make the links mapping across to the literature, and then find, and through that, discuss what I'm arranging and try to elaborate to show that I'm actually wanting to push my, things to another level of understanding, to sort of draw some conclusions from there.
Okay.
Because what I want to try and support you with is the idea that, there's going to be a bit of editing to this, there'll be a bit of rearranging, a bit of reflection, going back to some sessions in terms of how we talked about why we take a principled approach, What are the factors to consider? You know, is it about the individual? Is it about wider collectives? Are we talking about something that is more of a private concern, or is it a public concern? When we talk about education, we say it's a public good. That suggests, you see what I'm saying? So I think that you can play with. Is that helpful? I haven't actually finished completing the boxes, but I think hopefully you can manage from what I suggested.
Yeah.
This is an article that I just was searching through for today. It's probably quite interesting in terms of dilemmas. If I just showed, I'm not sure now how I can show you this, but if I might try and, I have it open on a different screen. So let me see, bear with me a second. I go back into my Zoom thing. Not that particular one. Oh, let me just stop sharing for a second, because then I can share and then hopefully share. Screen 2. I think you can see yourselves now. Can you see yourselves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I just minimize you. No, I can't minimize you. Let me move you across. Can you see the article on the internet that I'm pointing to here?
No.
No, you can't. Okay, well then that didn't work. All right. It's trying to be clever with the two screens that I'm working with, but obviously that didn't work. So if
Can you drag it across to the PowerPoint screen?
Well, what I'll try and do is, if I go back to sharing this screen that I was sharing before, so you should now see the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can open the hyperlink. Don't know what that was doing just then. Ooh, hello. Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was clever. All right. Okay. So this is the article. All right.
Yeah.
And I thought this would be something we can look at in terms of, you know, what would you highlight from this article? Right. There's some subheadings that might be helpful. Coronavirus predicted grades leave many questions unanswered. So talk about, you know, contemporary ethical dilemmas. Seems appropriate. So schools are asked to be ranking. See here? So what are the bits that you would highlight? Do you see what I'm asking of you? So I thought this article might help us to actually go through and sort of highlight what are the key points and how do they justify that? What are the arguments and how do they justify their arguments? So do you want to have a moment to read together this?
Yeah.
Like do an exercise to see if we've got this in the bag, as it were. Okay, it's about Northern Ireland. Predicting grades for GCSE, AS, and
that
A.
worked out well for them, didn't it?
Well, hey, I think there'll be some people who will find that this is a challenge as well as a gift, as it were. But
because it's if you can't really go by predicted grades. I don't think you can. I don't think it's very fair.
Right. So
there's an argument.
Exactly. Well done. Okay, brilliant. So you see, this is what you want to be doing is, what is it they're saying? What does that make you think about? Write that all down. Position it. If it helps you on the table, use the table. If it doesn't help you to do it in that way, because people learn in different ways and find note-taking their own ways of note-taking. So just do what works best for you.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to show through the table, and then look at the article and say, okay, so what is actually being said here, right? So we highlight this bit maybe, and I can do that for you because I'm not that clever, but you know, with the technology. But have a look at the different arguments that are there, How do teachers look? There's a genuine question. How do parents and pupils feel about this? Okay, right. So that's not a main argument, is it?
No.
So what's the next thing we could say?
You could talk about the Lara's concern.
Okay, so that's a student's concern. Look at a little bit beforehand as well. What are they saying about the unions, teaching unions? Lara's concern is a legitimate one. It might be a very good point to also highlight. But before that, we can say, okay, so what's the idea here about predicting grades?
They're saying that it will play a pivotal role in how students transition from GCSE to AS and A level.
Okay. And also, there's something that having to do this in these circumstances has highlighted something that unions have been and teachers have been saying for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that they're saying? The assessment.
Well, they talk about assessment and box ticking.
Right. So, you know, that there is a, you know, this presents an interesting situation to highlight the fact that there is a view that assessment is overly bureaucratic, right? That's the main point.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you can look at the concerns that the student has raised. And what does she's quoted there as saying that the grade won't be a true reflection of her ability.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So is there, you know, these sort of scoring and testing systems are things that we've over time increasingly relied upon because we've been told that this is important. That's why it's bureaucratic, because it's a top-down, this is what you've got to do, this is how you're going to do it. And that's why teachers and unions have commented about its bureaucratic nature, okay? The student herself is feeling a certain insecurity as a result because she doesn't know how that will compare with her peers, right?
Yeah.
So will that undermine confidence in students who have been trained and raised to believe that the assessment is important? And it's a way of, you know, accessing or showing what they're able to really achieve, and it's linked to achievement, right? And if they rank us, will she be disadvantaged or disadvantaged or advantaged, right? Do you see the arguments here? So
Yeah.
one is a concern, that's a main point. The arguments are how that sort of is reasoned through, how that's supported. Then you've got another student. Look at that. Okay, is that an argument to justify a point?
Isn't it more of a concern than an argument?
Okay, so that's what we try and do. It's saying, okay, what are the things that we can take out of this argument and list? That's why I'm saying list the key points, list the arguments. What are the key points? Assessment has been bureaucratic. It's all, you know, the student's sense of achievement might be undermined. It might, and you know, it might undermine the process of entry into university or feeling that you've actually earned your A levels, you know. Then you've got parents' views in there as well. If you've been going to a school that's very academically strong, perhaps, and that's the other thing. These are some of the arguments that they're presenting, aren't they? in terms of what might the outcome of that be? What might some of the effects of having to rank students be? And here we have another one, right? You might say that this is a key point. Raising levels of concern and anxiety. There's the key point is the uncertainty.
Mm.
And you've got quite a few things here that have been listed.
I think it puts more pressure on parents than teachers in this regard,
Well, how so?
because the children that are, so for example, the children that were meant to take the GCSE and A-level exams are all at home now, and all the pressure is on their parents to actually get them to do something regarding their grades.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you know, you've got a kind of the home front, the home environment,
Yeah,
the private,
because she said,
family being,
because the woman says that there's more anxiety and more nervousness in the household, so
Yeah.
that one child is putting it all on their family members because of their nervousness about the future.
right. And here's a parent's comment here that I'm highlighting. Have a look.
That there was no perfect solution to a problem, that teachers have a difficult job on their hand, but that her year off should have done. Yeah, I think that's better, because for mocks, I'm not saying from my experience, but they tend to revise more for the real thing rather than the mock, because people just think it's the mock, which is not actually going to mean anything.
Okay, so here's where your discussion then can take, but you know, take things a little further. What are the implications of this? What do we understand about the points that are being raised? How have these points been discussed? The level of uncertainty, you know, the level of the effects of anxiety that it might bring to students, to teachers, to families. Is it the right thing to do? Right? And here you've got someone who's a father, but he's also a teacher, and he thinks it's fair. So on what grounds would he think it's fair? Well, he adds, there's his justification or his argument that, yeah? So the future impact, the implications for the future are the arguments to the point that is being supported here by another interviewee. Do you see what we're doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Now that was all for the first assignment. If we move to the second assignment, I don't have any colourful pictures, but I do have 2 slides that I'm hoping will kind of probe and prompt you to think and reflect further on what you can do for your second assignment. Okay, so this time what you're doing is you're developing a critical commentary from your choice of article or chapter from the key text.
Yeah.
And you're expected to demonstrate wider reading. So it's not only an examination of you in terms of what you've understood and how you might respond to the points that are argued, the claims that are made, and the justifications that are given. But it's also how else you might support your view in response to what you've read. So key questions then. What is the premise? Okay, so what's the main claim here in the article that you're reading or the chapter that you're reading? What are the arguments that are used to reason through and support the justifications that are given? What examples, and this is what would be interesting for you to develop in terms of your second commentary, examples of practice that link to theory or the literature that you're looking at. So it's kind of, how can you relate to this? Because the best way of explaining something and showing that you've understood is by giving an example. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that way you can help your discussion to show how you might respond to the author's view or the arguments that they're presenting, whether it's to support that view because you find it's a reasonable view to hold and it seems sensible, plausible, or whether you don't agree with it and you think that there are grounds to object to that, and you would bring in counter positions, and you would also bring in your own examples to support that. And finally, from that point of a listing of questions, what implications are there for education and practice? Remember at the very beginning, it was like, you know, if you want to understand the context and relate to this context as someone who's passionate about education, you've got to be able to relate it in ways and terms of which you can say, what does this mean for education then? What should we be doing?
Mhm.
Right? Are there examples that we can draw upon that help me to support what I'm trying to conclude from what I understand? Or are there ways in which I can imagine that we could see examples that help? You might relate your own examples of experience, or you might imagine possible examples. And the aim here, and this is the final slide, is one, to have clarity, to clarify, okay? Try to make clear what the issues are, what's at stake, or what are the concerns. And as I said earlier, you can't assume that everyone understands the topic or the subject because we have familiar language. That's why we have to sort of, in a way, make the extra effort to say, what do we mean by this? How can this be understood? What do we mean by virtue? Or, yeah? What are the claims, the main points that are being made? How does the article justify these claims? How might others justify or counter these claims? And how do these views contribute to the way that we may understand what is at stake and being raised for discussion? So what might we understand these positions that have been presented? You know, if they're from the 19th century or if they're from the 21st century, these particular views are embedded in a nest or in a framework of values that, if they are good and they stand up, are they sustainable in a way? Do they have a positive impact that you see are worthwhile, that we would want to promote? Or is it something that you think there are some reservations to be had here? What would your reservations be, and why would you have those reservations? See what I'm saying? So think about the practical implications and the way forward to help. What might be involved? It's probably a fact that when you are dealing with multiple positions and multiple values in one context of a classroom or a school or an education system that aims to try and be inclusive, there are positions that have to be compromised, or there has to be something that has to be moderated. Or you say, well, by and large, what could we sort of consider that would have a positive effect on most all, if not all, those involved? And how would you sort of explain or justify, those who might be would there be any, that's the question, collateral damage, right? So would you have that sort of utilitarian view of, well, there may be some losses here, but maybe it's worthwhile if some people are disadvantaged. Overall, it seems fair if we take the example of the predicted grades case, right? Because of the circumstances and because it seems to account for giving everyone an opportunity, albeit that it may not be equal, right? In terms of, the outcomes may not have been necessarily what is predicted in the given situation, but you have to rely on certain caveats or certain claims that an argument that help to justify what you're doing and claim that it's fair. Does that help?
Yeah.
Khadija? Any thoughts?
No, I think I'm okay with it now.
Yes.
You all right? Is
Yeah.
everyone okay with that? Okay.
Mhm.
So what I would suggest is you look at the 2 components that you want to do and spend some time just going through and making sure you've understood the main points,
Yeah.
identified the various arguments, and you can map that to the discussions we've had about why is it we look at things from a point of view, what are the main objectives, aims, and what are the positions that we might consider to help support the arguments we would make or you would make in response to these articles that you have chosen.
I feel relieved because now I know that I did my assignment right.
Excellent. Okay. Well, that's really positive. I'm pleased to hear that. What I suggest is if you do this and then by next week, if you've got anything that you want me to have a look at by way of an outline, then by all means email them to me and
I've done that.
I'll give you some feedback. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. That's excellent. Well, I'm glad to know that you've started the process and you're feeling better about it and more confident.
Oh, yeah.
That's excellent. Any questions? Are you happy to leave it there and pick up any queries that you might have in time for next week, where you can email me?
Yeah, I was just looking at the questions that I had that I'd
Okay.
sort of pre-planned, but I think we answered them all already. So yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so what I will try to do is I will upload this slide that I've got for today, and I will try to make sure, I think it's still recording.
Yeah, it is.
And that's a good thing. And what I'll do is I'll put it up on Moodle for everybody. Okay?
So now, how many people are meant to be in this class? I'm just asking. I'm just curious.
I'm going to go back to the class list and review that, because from what I can see today, there's 4 students or 3 students and myself. So there's 4 of us. And out of a possible 25, I think. That's
Oh my lord. Muna, sorry, I've got a question about the modules for year 3.
Oh,
are they going to
save that for another time, because I'm doing this vertical dilemmas.
Oh,
Can
okay.
I just
Right.
stop sharing and then don't know what that's done. So stop recording.